Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Annie Kennedy. I'm the community manager at WITS, and I'm thrilled that you are joining us for our spring education panel, Building Relationships with Students in a Virtual Environment, sponsored by our partners at Aon and William Blair. Before I get us started and introduce our panelists, I wanted to give a quick reminder to everybody watching that we will have a Q&A portion at the end of the panel, so please put any questions that you may have for our panelists in the chat. This past year has brought about significant change for everyone, and for us at WITS, that really meant reimagining what one-on-one in-person reading programming would look like at a time when we just can't be together right now. Not surprisingly, though, the partnerships that WITS has with our teachers and our schools allowed us to build a new space centered on virtual connection. So when we came up with the idea of hosting a panel on building relationships with students in a virtual environment, we knew that there would be no one better to talk to about the subject than our teachers. Tonight, we're joined by three WITS partner teachers that we are all huge, massive fans of. Ms. Kara Haskey teaches bilingual fourth grade at McAuliffe Elementary School in Logan Square. Ms. Sharon Calico is an 8th grade English language arts teacher at Learn Hunter Perkins in Auburn Gresham. And Ms. Katie Andert teaches 2nd grade English language learners at Hibbert Elementary School in Albany Park. For all of our partner teachers, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We're really excited to have you with us. We'll go ahead and get started with our first question, which centers on routines and norms. So we know that routines and norms are an essential component to any classroom, and that going to school remotely this year was something that was going to be brand new for both students and teachers. So knowing that this was going to be a completely different kind of learning experience for everyone, we're curious to know how you worked with your students to set routines and norms for the class at the beginning of the school year. And I would love it if Ms. Calico, if you could start us off this evening.
Well, thank you, Annie. Welcome, everyone, and hello, everyone that's out there. What we did, we came together as an 8th grade team first before school even started, and we talked about setting the expectations the first few weeks of school. So as a team, we decided to keep our routines and norms the exact for every single class, so that when scholars will transition from ELA to science to math, it was nothing new. So what we did, once scholars did start, we pretty much built a contract with these scholars. And we told them week 1, it was all about what the routines are, cameras on, make sure that you're decently dressed for school, make sure that you are engaged. If there are any camera issues, send us a quick chat or send us a dojo message for any emergencies and so forth. So we spent the full week on just going over systems, routines, and norms. Then at the end of that second week, we actually sent home a contract to the parents and had the parents involved with the routines and norms as well. And our parents had to sign a contract to say that they understand that these are the rules, norms, and regulations of all of our classes. And so by the time we got into maybe our 3rd week or so, because in the beginning we did have some challenges with the cameras and just personal spaces and privacy with scholars, and that was a huge issue. It's still a huge issue. But once we got about that 3rd week, it was smooth sailing. The parents were on board. We all knew the routines like back to back. All of our administration team was on board, so because they would pop in and out of our classrooms as well. So the scholars, they just, from that point to this one, they continue on knowing, okay, I know I can't do this in one class and not the other because everyone is on board with the same routines and norms. And it's working out quite well.
Perfect. Thanks, Ms. Calico, for sharing. I'm really excited to hear and learn about family participation. You know, that's a really big thing for students, just for success in school overall, but especially when you're going to school at home. Ms. Heskey, I'm wondering how routines and norms worked out for you and your students in the beginning of the year.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm super excited to be here. It's been awesome to work with WITS, first of all. But so for starting out, we actually started e-learning in March of last year. So we had almost like this test run of seeing what our students were able to do on computers and what worked best. So at the start of this school year, I tried to remember the parts that were so hard and unrealistic for the kids and really focus on those. And like Ms. Calico said, we truly did not, I don't even think I considered academics in the first 2 weeks. I truly was so focused on technology, getting used to our technology, like this is what a school day is going to look like, and setting a schedule as well. Something that Ms. Calico started to touch on that I think it's really easy to forget is that when kids are home all the time in the summer, they don't have that strict set schedule that teachers give them and being in school gives them, and they need that to be successful and to manage their time. So this has been a change to do this online and like get them to schedule their own stuff. But I really think that spending those first 2 weeks truly like very focused only on routines, what things are going to look like so that nothing is unexpected for the kids was super important. And also just having the mindset going into it that there are going to be technology errors. There's going to be an assignment that you post that doesn't work for the kids because nobody's internet works, or they don't have a password, or it like they had free trial, and you'll get over it. Like it'll all be fine. And the kids start to realize that, oh, okay, it's not the end of the world. We'll come together and figure something out. We don't need to send 15 emails to the teacher. So I think just setting that standard of like kind of expecting that once in a while there's going to be an issue and all you have to do is just wait. I will get to you, like you will get your turn and we'll get it figured out. And that has been a lifesaver, I think, in comparison to last year.
For sure. Ms. Andert, I'm wondering if you had a lot of similar experiences to Ms. Calico or Ms. Haskey, or if there was anything different for you and your second graders.
Hi, everybody. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of what they're saying definitely resonates and worked for me this year. Our kids at Hibbard, pre-K to 2, well, really, I guess it was really mainly K to 1 last year, did iPads and mainly worked on Seesaw. And so second grade through sixth grade, they have a Chromebook. Now they're using the G Suite. And so it's kind of like a new world. So we spent a lot of time in the beginning just going through technology, and these are kids who they're little, they don't know how to type. They don't know how to necessarily have more than one tab going. We had to learn how to do that. It was a lot of things that we do with technology that we don't always even think about. So it was sort of as a second grade team dialing back and saying, okay, what do they need to know to get started? And kind of like what Ms. Haskey said, I wasn't worried about academics in the beginning. I was really worried about setting up the technology and predictable structures, predictable routines. I do that during a regular school year, and it was definitely as important, if not more important this year. Schedules, sending those out ahead of time, getting parents used to, because the parents hadn't used all this stuff either. We have a lot of families where technology is not a huge part of their home and their life. And so we have parents who, have a hard time keeping up with a lot of this too. So we were always sort of dying for an older sibling to be there. Like, oh my gosh, yes, you have a 6th grade brother, you have a 7th grade sister, like go get, a lot of them were my former students. I'd be like, go get so-and-so, go see if he's, and I always felt so bad for his teachers, like tell him we just need him for 2 seconds. But, I think in the beginning it was like, you just have to kind of roll with the punches. We did have a Q&A day, sort of like a bring your Chromebook. They could bring it to school. We had staff in the building that were helping them get it set up, answering questions. We had kind of a meet the teacher day beforehand outside, socially distanced and all that. So we did a few things like that just to sort of start the year off. But yeah, I think the predictable structures, accepting the frustration. It was a lot. There was a lot of frustration, and it was sort of just like being okay with it. So yeah.
Sure. And what I'm hearing from all of you and what you've shared is that a lot of it, this interconnecting thread of setting students up for success, is really about communication. And something that we've all been acknowledging for the past year, especially, is that the pandemic has really changed the way that we communicate, especially when social cues and just a general feeling of togetherness can get lost sometimes when you're meeting through a screen. And so we're wondering what strategies you've implemented to get to know your class this year, or for your students to get to know you. And Ms. Haskey, if you would like to start us with this question.
Yeah, I would really like it. I think that teachers have like really had to be creative and very flexible in the last year about getting to know students and like giving them that social time and your social time, because we do have those moments. I think that that's what this has taught us most, is that kids have so many social moments at school throughout the day that are not about academics at all, where they're just talking to other kids. And they also have so many social moments with you where you're just having like a general conversation about something and it's not about academics or something you're working on. So for them to lose that, it seems like we were just talking about predictable schedules. It's so contradictory to say, but it's nice every once in a while to break from your schedule and just give them a minute to talk and like truly socialize in the chat or out loud on their microphones when you have a chance to do that, because the kids really do need that. They want to talk to each other. They want to talk to your teachers. I don't know if you guys have ever had to end class early, but they're like, what? Already? And I was like, really? You want to stay? Like, I've never heard you say that before. But it's true. They really are missing their social space. So I think giving them that is really important. And authentic, but also we talked about last time the major challenge of cameras and microphones. I have 27 students and I probably get 3 cameras at a time on at most, and like maybe 5 kids using their microphone. The rest is completely in the chat. That was hard at first because you're like, okay, well, can you hear me? I need like a thumbs up or like I agree with you. But there's more to it than just participation. You don't know how that kid feels in their home, if they are embarrassed. Not all kids have a learning space where they can have a professional background and like have the ability to have their space be very peaceful and not disrupted. And they might be embarrassed, and you can't battle a kid on it and say like, I'm going to call you out until this happens, because it won't happen. You can't shame a kid into doing that. And you have to realize that the flexibility is what's going to get them to participate. Like you accepting their choice to keep it off, allowing them to participate in whatever way works for them. They'll see like, oh, okay, okay. I'll keep using the chat. I will keep participating, rather than totally shutting down because I got in trouble and she called me out because my camera and microphone are never on. And it is hard, like on a teacher, it's hard to not get that feedback, but then you can't take it personally. You have to think about it from like an emotional point of view for the kids and be empathetic, because you just don't know their situation.
Very true. And that's something that we have also experienced a lot in WITS programming, in connecting students and volunteers. You know, normally in in-person programming, volunteers are very used to the fact that their student is sitting right next to them. They can see them. They can pick up on a lot of those social cues. And for some of our volunteers, and even myself as a program facilitator, I know that there are going to be students who I may only interact with in the chat, or I may only hear their voice and never see them on camera. And so, Ms. Andern, I'm wondering, in that line of questioning, for you as a second grade teacher, how you have best, worked with your students when you may not be able to see them or hear them all the time, and provide some of your insight on that as well.
I mean, I'm a little bit lucky because I have little kids who aren't, they're not old enough yet to really be super self-conscious. We have a couple of kids who tend to turn their cameras off. And actually, I know when they go to their mentor groups for WITS, when you go into a Google Meet breakout room, it automatically turns your camera off. And so sometimes I'll go in and be like, what are you guys doing? Turn your camera on. Because it's you kids that normally 99% of the time have it on. So anyway, so I'm lucky in that respect. I have a few, but I also have GoGuardian. I don't know if everyone has GoGuardian. I hope everybody does if you're a teacher. So I can kind of see what they're doing. You can kind of tell if they're engaged. I mean, that's a little bit of I know mentors don't have that. So, I think asking very specific questions sometimes, or, like if I know this kid's really good at something, having them share like calling on them specifically, but again, I'm probably not the best person to ask about cameras off, because my kids are they're always kind of like want to have it on and they want to show us. I mean, I've seen their whole lives. I've seen their pets. I've seen their closets. I get taken, and I'm just like, so they're almost like oversharers at that age. But I think it has been interesting to see the difference. I think in the beginning I was like, this is so weird. I feel like I don't know these kids. And, by this time of year, they'd be with me and I would really know them and their personalities. But, and there are some kids where it is difficult to connect virtually, but then there's sort of another level of knowing these kids too. Like on the other hand, I know things about them that I would never have known if we weren't in this situation. I would never have seen their dog every day and know their dog's name and know when they take the dog out, and and I would never know, so it's kind of, and then I have these after school programs going. I have a games group, and so I'm always seeing, I don't know, there's just all this, there's kind of a cool part of it too, where it is a little more personal, which can be hard for some kids, and some kids love it. But anyway. Yeah.
And Ms. Calico, I'm curious to learn more about your experience, because as I mentioned earlier, Ms. Haskey teaches 4th graders, Ms. Ander teaches 2nd graders, and for the 8th grade scholars that we work with at Learn, what does engaging teenagers look like when you can't see them, or maybe they prefer to keep themselves on mute and utilize the chat?
Well, it's definitely a lot different than 2nd graders. I will say that. One of the things I will say that we have gotten to learn each other and know each other a lot more actually via remote than we were at the school building. That's the one thing I can appreciate with them. But it took me stepping back as a teacher and kind of showing and displaying some of my imperfections to them to get them comfortable enough to share a lot out with me. And I realized that most of the girls would have their cameras off a lot in the beginning. And it was because of hair or how they looked for the day and this and that and the third. And then I just one day just randomly had this come as you are type moment. And they got to see my imperfections. Then all of a sudden I'm like, turn your cameras on. What are we looking like today? And everybody started flashing the cameras on, and I see hair all over the place. I'm like, oh my God, you have a beautiful afro. Oh my God, you're beautiful. You're beautiful. So that they're not as self-conscious. And then with that, I also teach social emotional learning for the first 15, 20 minutes of school. So it's non-academic. We don't give them a grade for it. And that's our hangout moment. Last week, what we do, we take a subject and we talk about it for the entire week. So last week, we actually talked about stress and anxiety. Kind of getting to know, what does it feel like? What is the meaning of stress? What's the difference between stress? What's the difference between anxiety? What are you feeling like when you're taking a test? What are you feeling like when you happen to take yourself off Zoom and participate? And we actually gather all of these different issues, or I would say worries that the scholars had. And on Fridays, we always have our hangout time. So it's pushed back from academics right now for the first 15, 20 minutes, because that's our morning routine. And it's like, okay, we talked about this week, and this is what I heard you guys say. So let's talk about the stress of having too much work. Let's talk about the stress of now I'm getting ready for high school. Let's talk about the stress of my high school haven't chose me yet. And they're more in tune to engage when we're talking about them versus talking about the academics. And I just use the social emotional learning to just talk about some of the things that I know that they're experiencing, because of course we've all been that age before. And when we do that, it allows them to participate. We have more scholars that's willing to share out. And we still have some that's a little bit shy. So what I do, I use a platform called Peer Deck. And with Peer Deck, the scholars are able to share out, but it's anonymous. There's no name associated with it. So I always have those scholars who will take themselves off mute and just tell me all their business. They don't care. Social butterflies. But then I have the ones that's a little bit more reserved. So they'll put their comments in the Peer Deck, and I can show the Peer Deck with no name, and we can say, okay, well, someone is feeling this way. So let's talk about it as a group. How do you feel when this is happening to you. So that's our social hour, right? And again, I share out with them as well as they share out with me. They probably know a lot about Miss Calico and her teaching and her business, and they see my kids because we're all remote. They see my kids in the camera, so they'll come and say hi. I see their siblings in the cameras because half of them, they're 8th graders, so half of them are babysitting while their parents are at work and they're at school. And I understand that. I used to, in the very beginning, I was like, it's your class time. You shouldn't have the baby on your lap. Or it's your class time. You can't help your sister log in for class. But I had to remember that, hey, these kids, they have their own lives as well. And I have to realize that we're all at home. I'm fortunate enough to be at home with my scholars, but their parents are probably at work. And they are that 8th grader that, you know, the other teachers will call upon and say, hey, go get your sister, go get your brother, help you log on. So I had to realize that and say, you know what? Okay, let me give you 2 seconds to help your sibling log on. And so once that started happening, once we became human to them, that's basically what it is. Once we, you know, kind of step out of that teacher role and become human, they become confident with us, we become more trustworthy. They will do as I ask. They're going to do the work because they know Miss Calico is going to get them. You know, they're not so reluctant when they trust you. So once we get the scholars to trust us and we become human to them, that was it. Now, again, I'm not saying it's a perfect system because I still have some that will log in, cameras off, and I will close out for the end of the day, and there's nothing there as far as work. But the next time they come into class, what I've been doing lately is calling them out. Oh, such and such, I see you logged in. I can't wait to read your presentation because I see you're logged into Peer Deck. I know this person don't normally participate, but then that makes them want to participate. Or I start shouting out other scholars and, you know, what their thought process is. Oh my gosh, that's an amazing thought. Let's talk about that. Then all the rest of them want to participate because they want to get their thoughts out as well. So the engagement piece for me is quite different. And I have had others to pop into my class to see why my students are so engaged over other classes and what's going on. Is it like a party in here or something? But it's really not. It's just the fact that I know how to step away from the lesson or teach the lesson in a way that they don't even know that they're actually doing the lesson. So I don't know. It's something that I had to kind of pick up being remote, but it's working and it has been working. So I do appreciate the fact that the scholars have really come on board. My class is not a quiet class at all. We're always lively and bubbly and we're talking. If they didn't do the work, just for instance, today, I started off with a poll question before we even got started because we're reading To Kill a Mockingbird. And I told the kids they had to read 2 chapters for homework. I know they didn't read it. I could just tell they didn't read it. So I started off with a poll question and I started off in Peer Deck with my poll question. You just see the little lines going yes or no. The question was simply, did you read chapters 18 and 19? Now, the lesson in that was actually the visual for them to see how many of them are not doing what they're supposed to do. They not knowing that. So I said, come on, you all, let's be honest. Let's be honest. We're going to say if we read or not. So once they all answered, I displayed the results on the screen. I said, do you guys see now what I see as a teacher? I had one class, not one single kid did the reading. But if I had just went on with my lesson as usual, they would have never grasped that. And I had to, that was actually a lesson that I stopped and I taught them about integrity and owning their education. And from that moment, they was like, we're sorry, Miss Calico. I said, oh, no problem. We're going to actually do the audible. We'll read together today. But then you still got to do lesson tomorrow where you would have had your free Friday. Now you're going to have a lesson tomorrow. But it's just little subtle things like that. And it resonates with them because, again, just being human with them. Now, I could have just went all the way off the deep end and had them write a paper like I would sometimes do. But I'm like, okay, if you're going to be honest with me and tell me that you didn't read it, I'm going to give you the lesson of why these things are important and the reasons why. And then now I'm not going to even have that issue if they're going to read or not, because they're going to know Ms. Calico probably going to ask me a poll question or give me a pop quiz within there. So I'm going to read the lesson. So at the end of the day today, all 3 of my classes, I have 52 kids. They were like, Ms. Calico, what do we have to read for tomorrow? They were asking me before I can even get the homework assignment. And I'm like, oh, this is perfect. So I said all that to just say sometimes I just step back, become human to them, and it's a lot more engaging. It's a lot more feelings involved, and they love that.
Yeah, Ms. Calico, I so appreciate this idea of being human with our students and just really acknowledging the realities of what it looks like for children to be learning from home and to be going to school from home. And there's no more separation for them between school and home a lot of the time. So I really appreciate that you hit on a lot of those points, and also this notion of students, sharing and learning from each other, because that is something that has been very new for WITS this year. Normally, we're doing one-on-one literacy mentorship with our volunteers. But this year, because of CPS regulations, we had to make sure that students were in small groups. So we changed it up, and we have our joyful reading teams that our students are reading in. And I know that as teachers, you are all doing a lot of work with small groups of students as well. So I'm wondering how you create an empowering space for each student in their small groups when levels of participation can differ for whatever reason. And Ms. Andert, I would love to hear you start us off to share your thoughts on that.
So we do a lot of breakout rooms, especially for guided reading is when I spend a lot of time. The kids came in very low in reading this year for guided reading, or as compared to what they typically come in as. So I immediately sort of went into 911 emergency mode. So I spend a huge amount of time in small groups. I think that's really where, especially in virtual teaching, that's really where the heart of my teaching comes in. I think the whole group is great. And I always do, a lot of teaching there too. But when I pull, small groups, that's really where the kids, even the kids who feel less confident, who don't participate as much, really come alive. There's some kids that really, you can tell it's just a huge difference in their level of participation. So, and again, I'm in second grade, which is totally different than the big kids, as we call them. But, I do a lot of personal connection. I really try to, and that's something I think for mentors to remember too, is like, the more, not personal, but the more you can ask questions of the kids, get them to share with you, use their name, give them when they're reading or when they say something, they give a comment about the reading, really being specific. Like, I really loved how you picked up on that, or I really, like being very specific about it instead of just saying, great job. But like, I think that draws a kid in. And I think we have to remember too, kind of like we said a little bit ago, these kids they've missed a lot of socialization. And so those small groups for them, it's academic, but it's also these 2 or 3, 4 people who are now kind of, I can interact with them in a different way. And a lot of our kids, at least at Hibbard, have not had play dates. They have not had, time with other kids. They don't, their parents, they've been very impacted by COVID-19. And so they're not going to playgrounds. They're not going on play dates. They're not, they're doing all these things. And a lot of our kids aren't, but I just have noticed, especially with Hibbard, it seems like they're very, kind of disconnected. And so, I try to use that small group time too, to just give them a little bit of that too. Like, and you can tell when we get into small groups, especially I have a few kids in mind that just sort of kind of come alive. Like, they've been quiet for the last 15, 20 minutes in whole group. And then you go to the small group, cameras on, and it's like, hey, Miss Andert, because that's more comfortable for them. It's more, more personal. It's more, more of a connection. So I think, really, I think really just keeping that as a very real time, kind of like what Ms. Calico was saying, like keeping it real, keeping it, and sometimes we might be the only outside person they've talked to that day, or they've talked to, all weekend. If it's a Monday, they've only seen their family. And so they're just excited to connect with me, with the other kids anyway. So really opening up that space to allow that to happen.
Thank you, Miss Sander. Ms. Haskey, would love to hear your insight and thoughts on how small group work works out for you and your students, and especially with your perspective as a bilingual teacher as well, would be great to hear about. I think we may have lost Ms. Haskey. Oh, there you are. Perfect. Good to see you.
I meant to turn my microphone on and hit my camera, which I do all the time in actual class as well.
Not a problem.
But what I was going to say is that small group is like the best part of the day for the kids, but also for the teachers. But it also is a time online where in person kids can withdraw, but online they can really withdraw. I mean, like they can leave the computer. So kind of knowing them and knowing when to push and when to not is really important. Any participation, in my opinion, is good participation. If they chat me, I will chat them back, even if I'm using my microphone with other kids, because I don't care. Like, I don't care what language you're doing it in. If we're reading in English, but they can only ask their question or provide their comment in Spanish, I want to hear it in Spanish, because you can't, when a kid's trying to reach out and you tell them not to, it's a lot more to them than it is you saying, wait your turn, I need you to wait and hold it. I also think that just as WITS mentors, for those of you that are working with your students, prep them for success. It almost seems like you're making it too easy the first couple times to go through a book and look at the pictures and say, this is what's happening on this page. You can do that. You're not giving it away or giving them the answers. Or if you see a word that you know is too hard for them, go to that page first and say, find the word because, put your finger under it, say it again, say it louder, like really practice it so that when they get to that word, they hit it and they feel great. And I think another part that we all agreed on when we've spoken before at any grade level is pick certain things that you're going to focus on to correct, and don't sweat the small stuff. Ignore the other things. Don't care about spelling unless you're doing spelling. Like it's too much to pick at everything that they're saying and say, like, you need to fix this word and that word. It's actually this. And it becomes you shutting them down. They aren't going to want to participate when they're getting overcorrected and getting walked on or bulldozed. It starts to make them feel like they just can't do it right, particularly with an English language learner. So I think those things, and again, just being really understanding, it takes a lot of confidence and bravery to choose your second language to participate in over your first. If anyone here speaks another language or some of another language, you know how intimidating that can be. And for a little kid to do it, not only in general, but by typing or on the computer is pretty amazing. So again, I think all participation is good participation, fair game. If all you can do is yes or no questions, have them type Y or N. I mean, it really, you don't need a lot from them to get a read on whether or not they're engaged with you.
I was looking at our chat, and a lot of people are responding a lot to Ms. Heskey, to your advice of any participation is good participation. So thank you for that insight as well. And also just this acknowledgement of confidence and bravery. I think that's something very special to think about when we're working with young people who we are getting to know. Now we're working with them virtually. We're not in person. So I think that's really great advice also for folks to think about as well. And Ms. Calico, if you would like to share sort of what empowering 8th grade students looks like, either with their reading in small groups or just empowerment in general, what you have seen in your time with them as their teacher.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Annie. What we do for a small group, because I have 52 kids a day. So I take a chunk of them every day, Monday, Tuesday, no Wednesdays, Thursdays, and then no Friday. So each one of my classes, I have already designated scholars who have to come to small group. So what they do, they rejoin me after school about 2:30 through their Zoom, and we redo the lesson of the day. So and I do that so that I can break down any misconceptions. So instead of me just saying, okay, well, here's your lesson of the day, you didn't get it right, so too bad. I retake that lesson of the day, I open it up, and then we go through it because we're now in small groups, things that I can't do with everyone is in class, and we go back through the lesson. We do a lot of word replacement. Thank you, Ms. Haskey, for mentioning that, because I do that almost every day. Because again, 8th grade, we have some very challenging words. So we actually stop, look the words up. It's beautiful because we are virtually. So I like, hey, pop it into Google and put the definition in the chat for everybody. So I have my designated word person that actually goes and opens up Google every day. And every time we're in small chat, that person knows you're responsible for giving us a definition of the word. So we break down the word and we replace it with a simpler word. So then when they're reading, they'll understand, okay, instead of me saying imprudent, I can say unfair or something like that. So when we read that way with our small groups, our scholars who don't just quite understand, they're not at that 8th grade, 9th grade level yet, and we break the lessons down for them on a daily basis, when they get back with the regular group, they're able to participate more. They're used to word replacement. They're used to, okay, what Ms. Calico said, instead of doing the lesson this way, I can do it this way. So I kind of give modifications with my small group people, but I do it in a way to keep them on the same levels with my regular class, my 8th grade, 9th grade level scholars. And I say 8th grade, 9th grade, because at this time of the year, they're actually doing 9th grade work. I kind of push them to the next level because I know what freshman year looks like for them. The small group actually really helps me understand where the misconceptions come into play a lot. I do get scholars who won't participate as much with the regular group, and then they're like the star student inside of small group. I'm like, wait a minute. But that tells me that they're uncomfortable a lot of times with the larger group. So the small group really helps those scholars who are uncomfortable or kind of afraid in a bigger setting to just be that stellar student when it's a smaller group. And I'll allow them to actually talk to me and say, hey, what didn't you get from this morning's lesson? This is what because I can share my screen with them and I'll show them an example of what they should have done. And then I read to them what they put on there. And they was like, oh, well, I thought that it was this, or I thought it was that, or be honest with you, Ms. Calico, I really didn't read it that way because I didn't know how to. So we go back through rereading the lesson, breaking it down for them in their terms that they can actually understand. And then another biggest thing with my small group, I try to give them some connection. All right. So we're talking about books sometimes they have no idea. A lot of our scholars, I'm in Auburn Gresham, they haven't been exposed to a lot of different literature, especially when we start reading next module, when we start reading Shakespeare. I have to make all of these connections for them. So right now we're reading To Kill a Mockingbird. And if I can, and before we started reading, I showed them all these documentaries and different things that they can actually have a visual on. So I pull that sometimes and I say, hey, remember when we saw things about the Great Depression? Remember when we talked about the 1930s, when we talked about the Great Migration from African Americans moving from the South up to the North, what was Jim Crow? And then they'll go, oh, that's right. Remember when we saw the Scottsboro Boys? Remember that trial? It's the same exact trial that Harper Lee is doing right here in To Kill a Mockingbird. She just put a twist on it. So giving them, those scholars who do small group, giving them more life connections and showing them visuals, that has been a huge help. So like on tomorrow, our Fridays will be, I will show them more of the movie To Kill a Mockingbird up to what we've read at, and then I'll stop it there. And then they have to read a few more chapters, and then I'll show the movie of what they've already read. So our kids, well, my kids in particular, they do well when I can give them some type of connection, whether it's a visual, whether it's a story, whether it's a documentary, something to keep them engaged to what it is that they're reading. When we did The Great Fire of Chicago, those kids were not interested. But when I showed them the documentary and I pinpointed certain streets that still are streets and certain buildings that's downtown, they're like, Ms. Calico, I know what I said. I'm like, look at the lakefront. You see what the lakefront used to look like? You see that we had gravel stones and the horse and buggies. This is downtown State Street. And so then it was like, we can't wait to read this. What was happening during this time? Did all of this burn up? So just giving them some type of visual to show them or make them feel connected to whatever that they're reading. And I try to tell my scholars that all the time, all books are great. It's just the connection that you make with the book. And that's sometimes it can be challenging for scholars, but then when you talk with them and say, hey, what don't you understand? And you get their misconceptions, then you say, oh, that ain't nothing but this, put this net together, and that's what you'll have. And that's what they kind of, now they're starting to get that a lot. And some of my scholars I've had for like the last 3 years. So some of them, they love to read, especially my WITS babies. And some of them, they're still kind of slowly, they'll rather watch a movie or a documentary before they read. So I kind of let them watch up to where we're reading at, and then go on with the novel again. So that makes them want to go back to the novel, because they're like, Miss Calico won't show me the other piece of the movie or the documentary until I read it. So they'll read it and then be like, Miss Calico, I know what's going to happen now. So the biggest thing for me with those small groups is just making the connections. And once we make the connections, everything else will flow so much easier.
Thanks, Ms. Calico. And I think for all of our partner teachers here, I think one of the biggest takeaways that I have gotten from what you have shared with us is that education is not one size fits all. It's not a cookie cutter. A second grader should be here, a fourth grader should be here, an eighth grader should be in this spot. That it is really about getting to know each individual student that you're working with, and to the best of your ability, tailoring and customizing their educational experience so that they can have fun, so that they can learn, and really, how do we as adults build safe, trusting communities with our students, I think is so very important to know. So I really appreciate everything that you all have shared. Just a quick reminder to everybody who is out there watching our panel this evening, please keep your questions coming in the chat. We're really excited to be able to dive into some of those. And I do have a couple of questions now from folks who have put them in the chat. So we'll go ahead and we can transition into our Q&A portion now. So we have our first question is from Aaron, and Aaron asks if we can share other strategies or tips for working and reading with bilingual students. And I will open up that question to any of our panelists, whoever would like to go first to answer.
I think it's something that Ms. Calico said that, just reminded me to mention is, and Ms. Haskey has mentioned this a little bit too, is setting the kids up for success with reading, whether they're ELL or not, doing a ton of previewing a text. So, at the beginning, when you open that book on Epic for the kids, looking at the cover, making predictions, looking at the picture, thinking about the title, doing a picture walk, looking at maybe if there are some words that are going to be repeated, names that can be tricky, characters' names, anything to sort of set the tone. We talk about schema, but activating their schema, making connections. Oh, this is about baseball. Have you guys ever been to a baseball game? What happens in a baseball game? What's the guy who throws the ball? What's he called? Doing the vocabulary, because a lot of ELLs, they know, they just don't have the same amount of vocabulary to pull from for English. And so giving them the vocabulary, putting that sort of in there as they're about to read, sets them up for success and sets them up to really enjoy the book a lot more. Just want to throw that out there. That's my first thought anyway.
Thanks, Ms.
Yeah.
Andrews.
I can definitely add to that. This is my 4th year as a bilingual teacher, and I've always taught 3rd, 4th, or 5th, and I've always had a non-reader. I never get a year. I have always had one. Like, I think that any grade is fair game for these reading strategies that you kind of forget about when you start working with kids who have access to books and like full text. But I think that something really important is picking the right books and picking the right situation for a kid to read. Don't always make them read aloud. Reading aloud is really hard for some people, whether they're good readers or not, because it's an accuracy thing as well. Like, they're aware of if they're making errors. So I think just being aware of that. Also with ELLs, again, with the participation, have them draw. Say, like, draw, what do you think will happen next? Don't make them write always. Like, the writing is exhausting. It really is. It's exhausting for the kid and for the teacher. And then if you're going to have them write, they're only going to write one thing. Whereas if you were saying draw or tell me or make a hand signal, you could probably do 3 things and you can get a lot more done. Even though that's non-traditional and you don't have this artifact right there with you, you can remember, take notes. You know the kids. Once you get to know the kids, you kind of gain the flexibility to do that. And I also think with the bilingual kids, be flexible. So if you do happen to speak the language, again, this is specific to bilingual. I do speak Spanish with my students, but I am not a native Spanish speaker. So I really welcome the errors. If I don't know a word, I ask them. I'll be like, how do you say this? I know that you're one of my experts. You're extremely bilingual. And it gives them confidence, but it also shows, like, you guys, it's really not a big deal to not know a word in another language. It's pretty cool that you happen to know too. It's more impressive than like, oh, how embarrassing. They don't know this word. They aren't familiar with this topic. So I think just framing it for them, they're excited to work with you, and regardless, because a lot of the time ELLs don't get as many opportunities to work with different people because not as many people have the license to work with them at their school. So they have less exposure to teachers and different individuals within the school sometimes. So they're excited to work with you and they'll come to meet you. It's okay if you don't speak their language. They'll find a way to work with you and to participate. So I think, just be really empathetic, be flexible, and like really prep them on the books. I think that's the best tip. I think all 3 of us can agree that if you prep a kid on a book, you're going to see a huge difference.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for sharing. We have a question from Allison. How do you suggest advocating for students through remote or socially distanced learning?
Am I off mute?
We can hear you.
Okay, there we go.
You're set.
Okay, perfect. I'll take this one because this is something that I have to deal with a lot. What we do, we have weekly meetings, my team as well as our school counselor. And we kind of highlight those scholars who may be having difficulties, whether it's we've noticed some things behavior-wise, we noticed some things grade-wise, which is their academics. We've noticed some things where, maybe the parents are not home, or we notice that they always have the babies with them. So what we do, we get together as a team and we talk about some of these things. Hey, is this happening in your class? Is it happening in your class? And we just kind of come up with a plan for each one of these scholars. We know that it's very difficult for these scholars to be remote right now. They have huge responsibilities, so much so to where sometimes we as teachers don't even understand. We have scholars who they're responsible for running a whole household right now. And we're unaware of that. And we're talking about, did you read that chapter last night? Or why didn't you do your homework? And they have a lot on their plate. So it helps us a lot when we are meeting with our counseling team, because the scholars, they'll be way more honest with, well, I would say they have more opportunities to be honest with our counselors that's with them on a regular basis than they are with us, because they're not going to share certain personal things while they're in class. But then the counselor comes back to us on our Wednesday team meetings and they share out some of the things that's going on with them. And from that point, we as their 8th grade team, we come up with a plan. What is it that we can do to ease whatever issues that this scholar may be having? What is it that we can do to make sure that they have the resources that they need? They've been having internet issues. Internet's been cut off. They haven't really told us. So they've been on their cell phones trying to participate in class. We have, parents that's in the hospital. We have family members that's ill. We have children, again, that's running a household. They're babysitting. So many different things. We have become teachers as well as counselors. And I know all teachers can attest to this, that we have multiple roles that we play. So just kind of being mindful of that when we are speaking with them. If they're not having a good day, just kind of giving them a break sometimes. Checking into different resources for the parents and sending that out to them, having different resources for the scholars, saying, hey, okay, I know that you didn't get this done. We're going to give you an extension here. Not that they, they're perfectly fine and they need extensions, but if we know the person that they're going through some issues, offering them some extensions to say, okay, I know you couldn't get this done. We're going to extend this out to next week. If you need some help, rejoin my Zoom link after class, and you and we can actually do it together. And I have had students that will come 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the evening, and we online to 6, 7, 8 o'clock. I've been sitting in front of this computer for 10 hours sometime helping these scholars, not with just their academics, but a lot of their personal issues as well. So in retrospect to going back to being an advocate for them, making sure that we are all creating a plan across the board, because Ms. Calico can have her own plan and it works in my class, but what about everywhere else? So we do get together, we formulate a plan for these scholars. Sometimes we'll bring the parents in, sometimes it's not even necessary. A lot of the fixes are just, okay, what can we do academically to assist this particular scholar? We had scholars that was having financial issues when it came to getting into some of these selective enrollment schools. So we as a team came together and said, okay, wait a minute, let's find some funding out here. Okay. Found out about different programs that we sent to the parents to say, hey, get these scholarship opportunities done. Here's a letter of recommendation. I highly suggest that you do that. And we've had several students who actually get some of these scholarships, such as High Sight and other scholarships that we previously wasn't using at Learn. So just trying to be that second, third, or fourth person in their lives to let them know, hey, we here, we got you.
I also, to add to that, something that Ms. Calico said that's so important is that, like, no matter what age kids you're working with, I think all of us can agree that kids can sense if you are being inauthentic or insincere. So don't come at it like with some script that you found about how to ask them. Ask them a question. If you see something concerning, find a time to talk to them and ask them a sincere question. Because if a kid sees that you care about them, that's great. And they'll probably share with you. But if you kind of surprise them, and instead of saying, hey, I haven't seen you in a few days, what's up? If you come in and say, where's this? Where's this? They could lie, they might be afraid. It's really important to come at it so knowing that they have to trust you. They can't assume that they're going to get in trouble. Like, you're not the punisher as their teacher. One thing gets
right.
another, but you don't know exactly what the situation is. And if you're trying to help them, it doesn't always matter where their work is. There's other stuff, and you can get it done later. There's like other ways to find out than kind of going into like, let's look at the grade book. Let's pull up Google Classroom, because that can be intimidating. That's really intense confrontation for a kid. So.
Thank you. And I think too, what you're both talking about is really about those finding those social moments and being human with students really is the best way that we can go about it. We do have one more question that I think will be really cool for us to end our panel on. This question is from Trilisha, and she asks, from your perspective, what value does WITS bring to your classroom and students? And Ms. Andert, if you would like to start us off, and then we'll have Ms. Haskey and Ms. Calico share as well.
I think mainly, especially, they see me all day. They see mainly just me. I have a co-teacher in my room because I'm the inclusion room. And I think just seeing another adult who's taking interest in them is really, really a big deal. Like I said earlier, a lot of these kids are really kind of disconnected right now from a lot of their things they would normally be doing and conversations they'd be having. So having this other adult who pops in once a week, who's talking with them about books, or who's asking about their interests, or, whatever that is, whatever those conversations end up being, I think is really huge. I think just having another adult that cares about spending, even if it's just that 45 minutes, spending that time every week, giving up their time to come in. And I think it's another small group opportunity. I think this year, because it's more than one at a time, that's another kid that they get to sort of be with one-on-one, that they normally, in the whole group, there's 20, 25 faces there. This is another opportunity for them to get a social connection with another kid as well. But yeah, I think just having a fresh face is a huge deal.
Thank you, Ms. Andert. Ms. Calico, would you like to share?
All right, can you guys hear me? All right, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought a little bit about how to answer this question. I said, okay, just be transparent at first. So I have to be transparent. When I first experienced WITS, of course, we were brick and mortar. We were all in the building. And WITS to me was they're taking my kids at 2:30 and I need to get the rest of my lesson done. So because the kids will leave the school, that was their early day. They used to leave out on Tuesdays at 2:30, and I couldn't get the whole lesson done with these selected scholars that were participating in WITS. And I'm like, oh, do they have to go to WITS? I need them to be in the class. And it wasn't until those same scholars started showing the difference in their behaviors, their work, and their reading ability. So I realized, okay, WITS has actually got something going on here. Let me find out a little bit more about WITS. So I started speaking with the scholars. I've asked them, okay, what did you guys do in WITS? So I became like really wanting to know, really interested about WITS. And they would tell me some of the things that was taking place in WITS. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I need you to do in the classroom. But it was already happening unbeknownst to me. So now that I am a part of WITS, I see what their experience is like. And I agree with the other two, with Ms. Haskey there, Miss Arlette. It's another face, it's another support system, it's another resource for them. We don't realize how well these scholars flourish when they can just have someone that could inspire them or be inspired. And they look forward to that. They don't want to talk to Ms. Calico all day because they know I'm going to talk their ears off or make them write a paper or tell them to spell out that word that they just said. But when they come to WITS, it's like they just become their little selves. And I've popped in some of the classrooms and listened to the conversations, some of the things that they can't really express in the classroom because we're all academic based, but they can be so free and open. I popped into a class and the mentor was talking about her upcoming wedding with one of my scholars. And in my mind, I'm like, is he really interested in it? And he was like, well, what's going on? You didn't tell me you were getting married. Oh, and I was like, oh my God, this scholar is really into it. And then they were reading this book off Epic, and they was able to tell me what was going on in the book because I hadn't read the book before. So I say, well, you guys got to tell me about the book because I never read the book, National Treasures or something like that. And these same two scholars who I have challenges with participating in class, they was like, oh, Miss Calico, the book is about such and such and such and such. And they were just going on and on and on and on. And I'm like, oh my God, WITS is doing the work for me. and my immediate response was, okay, this is counteractive, but it was like a whole, I would say a circle of resources or a group of resources that these kids have now with being a part of WITS. And I wish that we can actually get more scholars to be a part of WITS. Because I think that they really could benefit from it. A lot of these kids, they look up to their mentors. They can tell me things about their mentors. I'm like, how do you know that? And it's because you guys have shared with them as well as they have shared with you. So I appreciate the WITS program. I am definitely now an advocate for kids to be in this WITS program. I know for Learn, we use it as we use it for scholars who are academically doing well, but I think we should open it up to those 1 or 2 or 4 or 5s that's kind of right there, but it just need a little more of a push. So we can put them into a program to expose them to something different, something fresh, something inspiring. So it would allow them to have an additional resource to help them out. So I appreciate the WITS program.
Thank you, Ms. Calico. We appreciate you as well. Ms. Haskey, anything that you would like to add before we end our panel for this evening?
Oh, I just totally agree with both of you guys. And this is my first year with WITS personally, which is crazy because my first year is this like funny version of WITS. But it's been happening at my school for years. And I've had students go, and I'm like telling you, it takes a village, because I've had this year, one of my students for the first time ever turned on his camera because his WITS mentor showed him a moose in his yard, and he unmuted, and I've never heard this kid speak. And since then, he's unmuted 4 more times, which it's clearly together. And like Trilisha, I've had, she remembers my student from 2 years ago. Like I forgot he even went to WITS. You guys do make such a difference. All the people in their lives reading with them, just because you're not doing like MTSS data necessarily, the boring part. Like they remember you guys so well. Like when I introduced, I was like, you guys had WITS last year. And they were like, we know her. Yeah. Like they remembered her from the year before completely. So you guys are a familiar face to the kids, and it's social time, and it's like freedom for them to be able to read. And it's not the novel I'm forcing them to read. So it's awesome.
Well, perfect. And I think that's a great note for us to end on as well. Again, Miss Andert, Miss Haskey, and Miss Calico, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. For everybody that's in attendance, thank you for joining us for our spring education panel, Building Relationships with Students in a Virtual Environment. For our partner teachers, we're so grateful to work with you. Teachers are heroes. You are all my heroes. You're everybody on the WIT staff. You're all our heroes. And we really hope that you have a happy, safe, and healthy and restful spring break. And we look forward to resuming programming after spring break. But I think that will close us out for the evening. So enjoy the rest of your night. And thanks so much for joining us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.